against Javier. So that's kind of how it's going to play out here. But of course, for one of these players, it's going to be lose and go home. Yeah, definitely. And still a long road ahead for these players. Of course, they have to defeat Jean-Emmanuel Duprat, and because of the nature of the double elimination format, if they do go to the finals and meet Javier Dominguez, they're going to have to beat him twice to take it all down. It all starts here, though, for our two players, Andrea Mengucci versus Gabriel Nassif. And it looks like Mingucci has won the die roll. Now, this isn't quite a true mirror match here, Paul. We have Bant versus Simic, though the decks are very similar. Yeah, so the advantages of being Bant is that you have a more streamlined mana base. You take a little bit less damage off your lands, and Nassif actually, instead of playing cards like Deputy of Detention, have access to that Disdainful Stroke. The problem with Disdainful Stroke is, as Brian Kibler alluded to earlier, you need to keep that mana up. You know, a lot of the fight is about who gets to resolve that Nissa Who Shakes the World. But if your opponent keeps up 2 mana, it's a pretty clear sign that they have that Disdainful Stroke. And it's not very difficult to play around it. We've seen, you know, these are top-level players. When 2 mana is up, they're going to try to play around it, unless they simply don't have a choice, right? And meanwhile, on the other side of things, Andrea Mengucci, since he doesn't have counter magic, he has Deputy of Detention. That's a more proactive take, right? You can let things resolve and then follow that up and play that Deputy of Detention to deal with whatever planeswalker or creatures on the battlefield. That's right. It's a big tempo swing back in the other direction. The two big indicators for who's going to win is if they have this, turn 2 Oko Thief of Crowns into before turn 5, or even just getting it on turn 5, the Nissa. And this is a big step forward here for Mengucci in game 1. Big draw here from Gabriel Nassif. Did not have a play on turn 2, but drew that Paradise Druid off the top, which will allow him to at least try to keep pace with, you know, this draw that Mingucci's had a few times already in the top 8. The classic turn 1 Gilded Goose into turn 2 Oko Thief of Crowns. Extremely powerful. It really is insanity, and as you can see, it's 6 loyalty, and in this matchup, that Oko Thief of Crowns is really just untouchable at this point on turn 2 here for Nassif, so he can just play that Druid that he drew. Another Gilded Goose, and the food stores are rising quickly. And by the way, one of them just got animated and started attacking here. So already down to 17, applying pressure with Oko, who's now up to 7 loyalty. A Disdainful Stroke off the top of the library is an interesting little consideration here, because before that, Nassif had some pretty clear options. He could, you know, go for the Wicked Wolf. He could just cast an Oko, something like that. But now, does he want to leave up Disdainful Stroke? This is the next turn when Nissa Who Shakes the World could come down. And as it turns out, Mingucci has it. Yeah, but the problem here is Nassif is already very, very behind on board. He simply just can't leave up 2 mana this turn for Disdainful Stroke. He just has to kind of hope that Mingucci doesn't have Nissa Who Shakes the World and add threats to the battlefield. He's just simply too far behind. There's already a 3/3 on the battlefield. There's an Oko on 7 loyalty. Nassif needs to play something this turn, but that is the problem of a card like Disdainful Stroke. If you're on the back foot, you simply can't afford to keep it up. And if you're on the draw, it's kind of a liability. Well, that means all bad news here for Nassif and everything good for Mengucci, because he was able to make a food token with his Gilded Goose. Does he have the ability, though, to cast that Nissa here? No. No, yeah, the Wicked Wolf actually taking down the Goose. Nassif, of course, mindful of the fact that Mingucci could have gone land Nissa, but Mingucci only has access to 4 mana, didn't have a land this turn, so he's probably going to have to use the Goose here, use that Wicked Wolf so that Nassif next turn can't play a potential Nissa Who Shakes the World, using that Wicked Wolf to probably go after that Paradise Druid. Yeah, good call, Paul. It's interesting because oftentimes you'd think, oh, well, he could, you know, sacrifice a food, get rid of the opposing Wicked Wolf. That's a nice play. They almost always go after each other's mana, and you see that double time here. And look at that tempo play here. Andrea Mengucci stealing Gabriel Nassif's Wicked Wolf, trading it in for a food, and we see just how dominant Oko Thief of Crowns is in any creature matchup. I mean, just look at this board here, and this is all just from that one Planeswalker. Unbelievable stuff here. Oko dominating the board from turn 2 for Andrea Mengucci. We've seen this time and time again. Nassif is going to try to fight back with his own copy of Oko, but is it too late? Certainly looks like it from here. Yeah, Mingucci just has the ability here to get that Oko off the battlefield. He's got 3/3 power creatures. Nassif only has 1 blocker, so at least 6 damage will go through.
he can follow that up with another play here. Not the best options here. He can probably play, his only real thing that he can do this turn is probably run out of Hydroid Krasis for 2, try to find land number 5 or mana source number 5 to slam that Nissa who shakes the world.
So a pair of Wicked Wolves and a food, all attacking Oko, guaranteeing that Oko gets off the battlefield here.
And keep in mind, Nassif can't just trade one of those his 3/3 with one of those Wicked Wolves because Gilded Goose represents an instant speed way to create a food. So probably don't want to be blocking the Wicked Wolf here unless he maybe wants to tax Andrea Mengucci's mana this turn.
At a major cost.
Right. And Nassif is probably wondering why Andrea Mengucci just chose not to use Oko for so far, right? Because normally you would think, okay, I'm just going to plus right away, make that food, but actually choosing to wait here and attack first before making a decision with this Oko.
At any rate, it works out, and Nassif decides, okay, if Oko's going to die anyway, I'd prefer to not make the trade. I'll just let that happen. Another Gilded Goose hits the battlefield. Oko +1 to wake up that food token from the Gilded Goose, and now you can see why he waited on it. And look at this board state. This is ridiculous.
Yeah. Because of that turn 2 Oko, we now have 2 3/3s on the battlefield. It's still generating food every single turn. We have a couple of wolves in play to eat those food, make it bigger. And Andrea just also has those mana sinks in the Gilded Goose. Now, Nassif, he can play Nissa this turn, but you know, Mingucci has had these starts where he doesn't even care if his opponent runs out of Nissa because he just has such an overwhelming board presence.
Get ahead, stay ahead. It's been the game plan here for Mengucci, and he won the die roll, had the Goose, had the Oko, has not looked back here in game number 1 against Nassif. Nassif trying to fight and scrap his way back into this game, but it just doesn't seem like there's really a way out.
Yeah, because with the 4 creatures that he has on the battlefield here, this just means that Nissa won't live. If Andrea wants to kill Nissa, he can't because he has the 4 3-power creatures on the battlefield. Alternatively, I mean, he's very close to just finishing off Nassif. I mean, Nassif's at 12. We're seeing 12 damage here represented on the battlefield. Oko can turn one of the Gilded Geese into an additional 3/3. That's 15. So Nassif does need to be careful with his creatures. If he attacks with that food token, he's just dead.
No attack at all from Gabriel Nassif. He's just going to pass a turn back. That's going to prompt Gilded Goose to lay an egg before Mengucci draws his card for the turn. It's another copy of Nissa. He certainly has a lot of top end at the ready, but doesn't really have a great way to get it going. He technically could cast Nissa here if he really wanted.
Yeah, he has the ability. He can create a food here, cash the food in for Nissa who shakes the world with both of the Gilded Geese that are on the battlefield, and he can attack for 15. He doesn't have a lethal attack this turn, so if he does play out the Nissa, he might just make an attack to just get the Nissa on Nassif's side of the battlefield off play, because I think one of the ways that Mingucci might lose this game is allowing Nassif to untap with Nissa in play because of all the mana that you can generate off of Nissa's static ability. So Mingucci only really needs to attack with 4 creatures, so he can probably keep a Wicked Wolf or a food token back, maybe even just the land.
Yeah, that's what he's done. He's left the forest back in reserve here.
And Mingucci, just knowing what's important in this matchup, sure, Nassif is at 12, but the most important threat in this matchup is Nassif. You simply just cannot allow your opponent to untap with that in play.
With Nissa, yeah. In comes the team. It looks like Nassif is considering blocking both copies of Wicked Wolf while there's no food. He's just double checking that it actually all works out. He would still lose Nissa who shakes the world in the transaction, but this might be a good window to get rid of those Wicked Wolves while he can guaranteed do so.
Yeah, it makes sense. Wicked Wolf is a very annoying threat to deal with, but I mean, at this point.
Speaking of annoying, Paul, another disdainful stroke off the top of the library here for Nassif.
And this was a big metagame decision to run in the main, specifically for the Bant Golos matchup, but it doesn't look like it's all that effective here, especially against opponents who kind of see it coming.
Yeah, and I see this as desperation mode now for Gabriel Nassif. He runs out of Hydroid Krasis for 2, but he is simply overwhelmed on the battlefield, facing down way too much heat. And that's going to do it for game number 1. Andrea Mengucci. Look, it was turn 2. I mean, he didn't literally win the game on turn 2, but turn 2, he was so far ahead that Gabriel was never even in it.
Yeah, yeah. I think I overheard Andrea because I believe the players can communicate with each other. He was just like, yeah, I got it. You know, turn 1 Gilded Goose into turn 2 Oko. That's kind of just the ideal opener. And oftentimes that's just going to decide who's going to win.
That 1-2 punch has become one of the defining plays in Standard. You'll even see the players when they talk about the deck or when they tweet about it, they'll say, well, how did it go? And they'll often tell you how many times they got the turn 2 Oko because it has such a high correlation with winning the game.
Definitely.
So let's address the sideboards now, Paul. It looks like Nassif is taking a look at the deck list really quick just to make sure they are not playing identical lists here, so there is some differences.
Yeah, Ether Gust is nice. It's much better than Disdainful Stroke because it can be used in a more proactive fashion. If something happens to resolve, you can still deal with it. Bringing in additional copies of Voracious Hydra makes sense because we talked about how important Deputy of Detention is in this matchup. So having additional ways to actually interact with that and get that off the battlefield is very important. Curious to see if Andrea Mengucci actually opts to keep the Deputy of Detentions in, because of the fact that there are going to be additional ways to deal with it after sideboard.
All right, sideboarding finished up, and it is time for game number 2. Andrea Mengucci or Gabriel Nassif. Gabe, he's up against it here now. He finally gets to be on the play, and he likes this hand here. It doesn't give him the turn 2 Oko, but he does have Paradise Druid into Questing Beast or Oko as he sees fit. And it looks like Mengucci's also kept very quickly here, perhaps on the back of Once Upon a Time. Looking for a goose.
Yeah, he quickly mulliganed his opener here, and he does have a mana. Ooh, and look at this. I mean, we have potentially here a turn 3 Nissa if he can find an untapped land, because he can go turn 1 Goose, turn 2 Leafkin Druid. So if he just finds an untapped mana source here, he can run out that Nissa on turn 3.
Yeah, this turn he gets to play Leafkin Druid. That's 1 mana, 1 from the Goose, 2 from the lands. He just needs that untapped mana source. And he could play Nissa on turn 3. And if you thought the correlation on turn 2 Oko was high, watch what happens if Nissa hits the board on turn 3.
Yeah, I think Nassif might want to double spell here, use Ether Gust to get that Leafkin Druid off the battlefield, and then follow that up with the Gilded Goose. That puts him in position to draw land or mana source number 5 and slam that Nissa Who Shakes the World next turn.
This matchup does often play out as a race to see who can get Nissa on the battlefield first. And right now, it is unclear which player will be able to do so.
I wonder if he's going to wait for upkeep to cast the Ether Gust, because if he does, Veil of Summer is going to get him.
Yeah, he actually just let him draw the card, perhaps just planning on using Ether Gust on whatever it is that Mingucci casts. As it turns out, it's just Fabled Passage, so no untapped land here, though he did draw Wicked Wolf.
Yeah, but this does leave him vulnerable if he does want to fire off that Ether Gust, but it looks like he's not going to. Ooh. Everybody here is watching. It's like, are you going to do it?
Are you going to do it? Are you going to do it? Mingucci, he's got that Veil of Summer in his hand. Look at Nassif.
I mean, this is the reason why he's taking so long is because he is mindful of the potential of Veil of Summer. He's thinking, okay, you kind of want to use your mana every turn and set yourself up because he has so many powerful spells in his hand that he wants to deploy.
You see, getting that rope going nice and early here, but it does look like he wants to go for the Leafkin Druid, although perhaps he just... There we go. He's going to go for the Leafkin Druid. And we're just going to see that.
This has got to be so tempting, right? I mean, you're just countering a spell and drawing a card.
So powerful when it goes off. And Nassif says, yeah, okay, I knew that was a possibility. It was Paradise Druid in a hand. But remember, that was on Mengucci's end step. We're back onto Nassif's turn. He draws his card for the turn. It's an island.
That was a really big draw. That's mana source number 5.
So he gets Nissa?
Nassif can now slam Nissa, and now he's just got to be thinking about the potential of Mingucci maybe having a counter spell. Something like a Disdainful Stroke. But, given kind of the nature of his hand, it seems like his best path to victory here is just slamming this Nissa.
Yeah, Mingucci does have copies, 4 copies of Disdainful Stroke in his sideboard, though none in hand as we know. So this Nissa who shakes the world will be resolving, and this is a big step forward here for Nassif. You can see the concern growing on Mengucci's face. He's like, okay. Really wanted to see that untapped land next turn for Mengucci, and now he's fallen behind pretty significantly. Island is going to get animated and attack in for 3 before getting the turn passed after the Gilded Goose makes an egg. Also Fabled Passage gets sacrificed.
Mingucci really wants a land here. If he draws a land, he can go Nissa Wicked Wolf. But he did not find it. So he has a couple of options. He can still run out the Nissa here. Alternatively, he can just play out a Wicked Wolf, kill the land. There's also just potentially playing a 3/4 Voracious Hydra. Having a 3/4 on the battlefield is very, very nice against an opposing Nissa. One of the things that we've constantly seen time and time again with this deck is it is very good at creating a stream of 3/3s. So having that 3/4 is a big deal because it just buys you a lot of time.
Yeah, it really does. You see the 3/3s from the lands from Nissa, but also Oko makes 3/3 Elks. So those are the primary win conditions at the end of the day. And it's nice to have. So now both players with Nissa who shakes the world. Nassif is going to take a quick sip of water here because, well, there's nothing he can do anyway at this point.
But Nassif has Questing Beast in his hand. That's going to attack through the Paradise Druid. This is going to get rid of that Nissa that's on the battlefield because that's guaranteed 4 damage. And yeah, you can see the look there on Andrea Mengucci's face. He did not want to see that. And yeah, this is a dead Nissa. And Andrea knows. I mean, this matchup is all about that Nissa. And Nassif now has the upper hand here. He's the one who's going to be able to make a 3/3 every turn. He's the one who has access to all that additional mana.
Huge swing back in Gabriel Nassif's direction here. The ability to play Nissa, capitalize on untapping with Nissa by removing your opponent's copy of Nissa before they get to untap with it. Massive swing. The Questing Beast also gets to hit Mingucci down to 11 before finishing off, as it turns out. Nissa wasn't even there, but Mingucci's life total also falling, and play Oko as the follow-up play here, Paul. That is ridiculous.
Yeah, this Nassif's board is just going to just continue to grow. I mean, he can even make a food here with Gilded Goose if he wants, and then turn that into a 3/3 to have additional blockers. A lot of different options here for Nassif. But there are just so many different threats on the battlefield that Mingucci needs to deal with.
That is the name of the game here. Building up resources turn after turn, because we've seen pretty consistently that the Simic deck, it can make some strides to come back. It can take a step or two, but it doesn't have that big swinging play to bring it back. It can only get further and further ahead. And that's going to do it for game number 2. Gabriel Nassif. Woo, baby. We're going to get a game 3 here, Paul.
That turn 2 Paradise Druid was so big for Nassif.
Clutch.
Making sure that he had that acceleration to be able to get, his tempo going.
So more sideboarding here from our players. It's like one Questing Beast there.
Got to keep him honest. I don't even know if Andrea Mengucci was expecting the Questing Beast. But the sizing is still pretty solid, especially if you're on the play. You can really push the tempo. Bigger than the 3/3, and even if your opponent casts something like a Voracious Hydra to try to fight the Questing Beast, because it has Death Touch, it'll trade.
Everything on the line for our 2 players here, Andrea Mengucci versus Gabriel Nassif. The loser is going to make their exit from the tournament. Now, that won't feel good in the moment, but they can both be proud of their accomplishment on the day, that's for sure, and on the weekend. But you just don't even want to think about that if you're sitting in their seat. They still have a trophy in their sights at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. There's just so much on the line here. You make your way to the finals. I mean, you have a chance to win $100,000 and a slot into the World Championships. There's a lot riding here.
The way this is going to play out, by the way, if you're just tuning in, is the winner of this match will go on to play Jean-Emmanuel Duprat, and then the winner of that match will make their way to the grand final against Javier Dominguez. Javier was the first one in that grand final, and he's going to have to be beaten twice. That means 2 matches you have to beat him in. Right now, your heavy favorite is Javier Dominguez on Gruel, but he doesn't have that trophy just yet.
Yeah, I know Javier was talking about hoping to see his good buddy Andrea Mengucci in the finals, but I think secretly he wants Jean-Emmanuel Duprat to make the finals because he brought Gruel specifically to beat Pankolos.
That's right. Maybe he'd just be fine with either one. You know, like, he's like, hey, I'll take my friend or the good matchup. You can pick. All right, turn 1.
Ooh, that land was big.
Here. And
that land was big.
Which land are we talking about here?
Andrea Mengucci just needed a 3rd land here because he has turn 1 Goose, turn 2 Druid, turn 3 Nissa, who shakes the world.
Hey, that is huge. We don't see the turn 2 Oko this time,
oh
but here we go. Pay the 2.
This is
crack.
This is what you want. This is the ideal start, and Andrea has it. He mulliganed, but he found it. Turn 1 Goose, turn 2 Druid into this Nissa.
Gabriel Nassif now all of a sudden way behind in a game that he was hoping to at least keep up with this Paradise Druid on his turn, and he finds himself at a huge disadvantage.
Yeah, what can you even do here? Maybe you can try to put some pressure. You can just play a Voracious Hydra, get Paradise Druid off the battlefield. You can play a 2-3 Voracious Hydra. You could also play a 4-5 Voracious Hydra just to block, but I mean, Andrea Mengucci is going to be able to turn all of his lands into 3/3s. He has a ton of mana available to him. He can, if Gabriel Nassif uses the Paradise Druid, Andrea Mengucci can then use the Wicked Wolf to get that off the battlefield with the Questing Beast. I mean, next turn, Andrea Mengucci could be attacking for potentially 12 damage.
Unbelievable stuff here from Mengucci. I mentioned it before, but if you thought turn 2 Oko was good, turn 3 Nissa has such a high correlation with winning. Andrea Mengucci has put himself very much in a fantastic position here to advance to the next round. And once again, when you start seeing this, when you see Hydroid Krasis for 2, that's desperation. This is Nassif trying to do anything he can to put some pressure on Nissa and affect the board this turn. And he needs everything to go right from here on out. And given what we know about Mengucci's hand, it's good. He's got a Wicked Wolf and a Questing Beast in hand, and he's going to start applying huge pressure here.
Got everything. Everything's going to get in here. Then you can just run out the Wicked Wolf next turn, or in the second main phase, and yeah, this one's just going to be over. Wow.
Unbelievable start from Mengucci. That critical turn 3 Nissa, and even though he mulliganed, even though Nassif has this powerful hand, I mean, his hand's pretty good. He's got Oko, a Hydra, another Hydra, and you see Nassif say, whoops.
Yeah.
And the players are having a little bit of fun here. Unfortunately, it's going to be the last of the fun here for Nassif. He says, I'm going to take my time on this last decision. But look at that huge smile from Mengucci because he advances to the next round, defeating Gabriel Nassif. We're going to say goodbye to Nassif, our Hall of Famer and challenger. But what a great run and what a great time to see him back on the tables on Sunday Play. But alas, it's Andrea Mengucci who moves on.